Leslie, I am so excited for this time that we get to have together today. I described you today as a client turned dear friend, and I couldn't mean that more. Meeting you, hearing your story, working with you, and helping to bring this beautiful thing that you will hopefully share with our audience today to life and to the market and just into the world has been an honor and a blessing. And I just want to thank you for being here today and thank you for using your story to truly change and save lives.
Hua, thank you so much for having me on today. It is an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast, and I look forward to shedding some light to this dark topic.
Absolutely. Ooh, if that's not a hook, I don't know what is.
That was a good one.
Really good.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Amazing. Well, I would love for you to just share, who you are, your story, what brought you here to this place that you are today.
Well, here I am, Pua, 6 years post MS diagnosis. 6 years ago, I woke up to discover that I was paralyzed on the right side of my body. It was quite a morning, to say the least. My newborn baby was 3 months old. My eldest child was 4 years old. So I had two very small children to care for. I woke up, I went to swing my legs over the bed and they didn't swing. And my right arm was dead at my side. As a former ICU and trauma nurse, I thought to myself, oh, this isn't good, but it certainly doesn't take a medical background to know that this is a very alarming situation. I called my husband at work and said to him as calmly as I could, this is what happened this morning. I was sitting on the floor when I called him. I said, please come home. I then dialed 911 and had EMS come to my home. They did a quick assessment on their way to my home. As I mentioned, I do have a medical background in acute care, and I was going through the assessments head to toe on myself in my mind. And I had ruled out gastrointestinal, I had ruled out cardiac, I was not having chest pains, I was not having a stroke, I had full symmetry in my face. I thought, this is far worse. So I was rushed to emergency where they did an emergency MRI, and I was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was given 15 minutes with the neurologist. I was told I would never walk again. And my neurologist handed my husband a pamphlet of how to change my home, manipulate my home to make it wheelchair accessible. I immediately, Pua, truthfully, I rejected the diagnosis. I thought, this doesn't make sense. It just didn't add up for me, Pua. I am a former athlete. I did a little prancing around in beauty pageants. I was a healthy woman. I was healthy and whole. And to wake up with this bombshell of a diagnosis didn't align with the vision that I had for my life. And I thought, surely to goodness, there must be some people in this world that received a diagnosis like myself and thought to themselves, this cannot be it. This cannot be my story. And that was the beginning of it. That was the beginning of the journey.
I mean, I've heard your story before as we work together, but every time you tell it, it's chilling because there are two ways to react, right? There's surrender and there's fight. And you chose to fight and you chose to advocate for yourself and for your family and to look into alternatives, which I admire so much. And I just want people to really hear that message because just because one person, one professional, one doctor tells you that something is true, doesn't make it true.
Isn't that, pardon me for interrupting, Pooh, I apologize. You just hit it right on the head. My choice was sink or swim. And if you know me at all, sinking is not in my vocabulary. I thought, okay, I'm a former trauma nurse. I'm a former ICU nurse. I don't hear the word no. I fight for my patients. I advocate for my patients. Why on earth would I not advocate for myself? It's important that I tell you the whole story, Pua. I was 222 pounds when I received this diagnosis. I was not the definition of health. I was certainly not putting healthy food in my body. I had a significant amount of stress in my life. I was smoking. I was drinking alcohol at the time, not to excess, but certainly something that I could take a look at. And I looked at my husband and I said, I have a lot of work to do. And my husband was probably rather nervous with that statement because he knows that I was going to roll up my sleeves. And the joke that I tell people is I rolled up my sleeve singular because I only had one working arm at the time. And then, of course, I had a young child, my infant, to take care of, who was still very much nursing and completely dependent. And then my 4-year-old, who was a very busy little girl. And I certainly wasn't going to be unable to care for her and bring her to the park and enjoy her. So I did. I had a lot of work to do. And exactly what you said, Pua, I had to sink or swim. These were my two options. So what I did was I actually went on Amazon and I started ordering books to my home of people that recovered from multiple sclerosis and were telling their stories. And what I found to be fascinating was their stories were incredibly similar to mine, and they made it sound rather simplistic. They made very clear that it was going to be a tremendous amount of work, but that if you did the work, that you could indeed reverse this diagnosis. And I thought, that's good enough for me. That's good enough for me. That's all I need to hear. If other people can do it, I can do it. That's the last thing you want to tell Leslie Wingrowich is something that she cannot do. So that's where it started, Pua. And the very first thing that I could control was the food that I was putting in my mouth. No, I couldn't control very much else. Is that proper grammar? That's the grammar we'll use. I couldn't control very much, and I started there. So I began with intermittent fasting, eating as little as possible. When I started researching the digestive system, regardless of my acute care background, in acute care specifically, you don't spend a lot of time talking to people about their dietary habits. They come in with dual femur fractures, head trauma, strokes, and really serious emergency cases. You're not talking to them about their diet. And that was something that I didn't put a lot of weight into for myself. So that's where I started. And the weight started to fall off. My symptoms started to dissipate almost, I would say, within the first 3 to 4 weeks.
Wow.
And yeah, the progress was really quite significant.
And that's
As
just
I
the diet change.
Just with the diet change, exactly. And what did I do exactly? The rule that I created for myself was, if God didn't make it, I'm not going to eat it. And that's really what it is. Of course, you're hearing a lot of people in dietary wars now of what's good and what's not. But I think at the root of it, Pua, you stay away from things that are created in a factory and you lean toward things that are not. And that makes a very simple roadmap. I am delving deeper into it now as I am healed and looking more deeper into it. But at the root of it, it's if you stick with natural whole foods and we get out of our way, so to speak, the body will heal. If you put the wrong type of fuel in your vehicle, there's going to be a problem. And this is what I told myself. And it started to work. Yeah. And then I started to go deeper. I thought, okay, so my mind was becoming more clear. Brain fog with MS is absolutely crippling. My symptoms were incredibly severe, Pua. One of the major questions that I get, even from former colleagues, is how do you know you actually had MS? How do you know that you actually healed yourself of MS? Was it multiple sclerosis or were you misdiagnosed? Nope, my neurologist would be pleased to say that no, it most certainly was MS. I had lesions on my spinal column, and that's why I lost the use of my limbs, was because the brain was disconnected from the body. What happens with MS, Pua, is you have a wire, for lack of a better analogy. It's actually a pretty decent analogy. It's a wire that connects the brain to the body, and it becomes uncovered. If you take my husband is going to laugh at me when he hears me talking about this, whatever they're called, strip a wire, pliers. My husband, I think that's hilarious. When you strip the wire and the wire is exposed, that's what creates the disconnection and the horrific symptoms with MS. And when you and I get a paper cut, we don't rush ourselves to emergency. The body heals itself. And somehow, for some reason, we have a disconnect when it comes to the brain. We think that our brain cannot heal itself. And we are miraculously created. We can heal as long as we give our bodies the right tools. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question. But the first answer to your question was I started with diet.
Fascinating. And it's incredible how quickly things started to turn around with just that one change. But that wasn't the only thing you did.
It wasn't the only thing I did. So as I started to heal, I was able to research more. I got sidetracked there, but brain fog makes it incredibly difficult to research and read. I could only hold attention for about an hour at a time at the very most. And then, of course, I had to tend to the hygiene and well-being of my children. So I had to be very careful with my energy. With multiple sclerosis, it's called chronic fatigue. It's absolutely crippling to the point where you have a hard time walking up a flight of stairs. In fact, my child, as I mentioned, was 4 months old at the time. For the first 6 months, 8 months of her life, all of the photos that I have of my child are on the bottom floor of my home because I couldn't take her anywhere else. I couldn't bring her upstairs. So as I went a little bit deeper and I realized that there might be a connection to silent infections in our body. And people kept talking about, people who have healed themselves of multiple sclerosis were talking about silent infections, silent infections. And they're being very, very cryptic with this. So finally, I realized that they were drawing a correlation between multiple sclerosis and parasites. And I thought, for goodness sakes, I just don't have time for that. I mean, that's just absolutely foolish. I have a medical background. If there was something to learn in that field or in that area, rather, they would have taught us that in my education. So I really didn't have a lot of time for that. But as I started to go deeper, it seemed to make more and more sense. So I begrudgingly went to my health food store beside my home and I purchased Dematicus Earth. Now, Dematicus Earth is an anti-parasitic powder that supposedly is supposed to kill parasites in your gastrointestinal tract. And I thought, okay, I think it's supposed to be rich in calcium too. So I thought at the very, very least, I'll be getting some calcium in my diet. Keep in mind, I'm still staying very tight with my diet and my symptoms are subsiding slowly but surely. So I thought, okay, this is not going to do any harm. Worst case scenario, will have wasted $30. Okay, so I put it in my water. I'm taking it once a day. At the risk of painting quite the picture for you, I looked into the toilet after going to the bathroom. Number 2, Pua. Okay, nice nurse. I'm not a nice nurse. So I had a poop and I looked in the toilet and I looked at this poop and there were worms in the toilet. And I thought, oh, for goodness, this is...
Sorry.
No, you go right ahead.
I apologize. I'm just curious, how long did you take is it diatomaceous earth?
Yeah, yes, diatomaceous earth is how you pronounce it exactly. I would say a week.
Wow,
I would say
that
once a
happened
day for a
really
week.
fast.
Yeah. So I thought, this is silly. Like that, I must be seeing things. This is silly. So believe it or not, I picked these little critters up and put them on a piece of paper and I brought them to my GP. Oh yeah. Leslie the detective at work here. So I marched off to my general practitioner, my doctor, and I said, what do you think about this? And my doctor is very open-minded. He's a very beautiful person. And I said, what do you think about this? And he said, I think that you should send those in. I think that we should send this to the lab. So we sent it to the lab. Week 1 goes by, no results. Week 2 goes by, no results. So I will tell you that with my medical background, I know exactly why a stool sample would be rejected. And there's quite a few reasons. The label can be soiled. You didn't use a sterile technique. There's a few reasons of why the sample would be rejected. And I went to great measures doing this sample properly. I got notice that it was rejected. I drove to the lab and I knew these people. I've worked with them for many years. And I said, why was my sample rejected? And they got a funny look on their face. And they said, we just don't know. And that was the answer. And I thought, okay, I think I'm onto something here. So I started to go a little bit deeper and I thought, okay, well, until I'm not going to research this any further until someone can explain to me what the correlation between MS and parasites is, because I need to know why before I go down this rabbit hole and potentially waste my precious energy and time. Keep in mind, I'm still very much healing, doing far better than I was a few months prior, and taking care of my children quite well, but still have very limited energy.
Are you still paralyzed at this point?
Okay, great question. So my leg came back, but my arm did not. So my leg came back.
All this including caring for children with one arm.
Yes, actually, oh, this is probably relevant to tell you, Pua. I was putting my chin on the counter, holding the cucumber down, cutting up my little girl's snacks.
Wow.
And then I would cut it because my right arm might as well have been tied behind my back, and it's my dominant arm. And then I would have to cut the cucumber. I actually got pretty good at it. Yeah, it was something. My husband would come home after a 14-hour day and have to shower me, and it was, yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. So, okay, so to answer your question, my leg came back within about 2 months. My arm came back within about 4 months. So I was marching off to the GP's office with worms here, with a dead arm, but I was
Oh my
happy
gosh.
to do it. Yeah, so I wasn't able to drive. I was quite dependent. I had friends that had to drive me around and such.
Imagine, I can only imagine, and I want to get back to, continuing to talk about the trajectory of your healing. What was it like for you when you finally got use of your leg again and then your arm again? What? I can't
I
even imagine.
haven't been asked that question in a really long time. I forget. Obviously, I was ecstatic. I was ecstatic. I was told I was paralyzed. I was told that this was not going to be possible for me, to the point where I'm sitting in a waiting room with multiple other sclerosis patients that had been sitting in the waiting room with 10, 20 years of being in a wheelchair. And I just thought I did reject the diagnosis in my mind, but as you can appreciate, I did think to myself, is this going to be my future? Is this going to be my life? So to answer your question, yes, I was absolutely ecstatic. So what happened was I was folding laundry in my bedroom, and my little baby was having tummy time on the floor. And then my 4-year-old started dancing. And I remember the name of the song, Girls Like You, dun, 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 dun. I can't think of the name of the song. So great. Adam Levine. So it
Terrible.
came, Adam Levine, good song. So it came on the loudspeaker in our, or on the TV rather. We had it on the TV. And my little girl said, Mama, dance with me, dance with me. And I thought, oh gracious, this is the kind of moments that just rip your heart out. And I was used to clinging to the wall and then kind of hopping, for lack of a better word, like hopping along the wall. And I thought, well, I can try and hop. So maybe that's what I'll do. So I clung onto the wall, walked over to the TV where she was twirling. And I just thought, maybe I could just try. It's called a foot drop, where you drag your foot behind you. It doesn't work. And I just tried. I tried to put some body weight on it and steady, steady, steady. And I got it. Now, we weren't twirling around ballroom style, but I was dancing. I was able to walk. My gait was a little unsteady, but we were doing it. Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty incredible. I haven't thought about that for a while. That's a fun question.
I mean, I can only imagine it would be like, is this a dream? Like, because and if anybody out there is not sure about, MS, it's very popularly known as being incurable.
That's
And
right.
so for you to
That's right.
have this experience, I mean, that's why this is so incredible, but also like you're going backwards from the diagnosis. And that's something that so many people never experience. And so I hope people hear this and they're inspired. And yeah,
Yeah, good thought. That's right. Yeah, exactly, Pua. Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things that was just completely eye-opening for me, so I started to walk, my arm was burning and it was in a significant amount of pain, and I thought, okay, that's positive. At least I can feel it now. And I still wasn't able to move it, but it was coming back to me slowly. I had a really horrific metallic taste in my mouth, as if was sucking on a penny. It's a very common MS symptom. And it was starting to subside. I could taste food again. It was enough to drive you mad. It was just enough to drive you mad. Didn't matter how many times you brushed your teeth or spit or washed your mouth out with mouthwash. It was just this constant metallic taste. So that started to subside. So things were looking up, is my point. So when I started to look down this road of parasites and MS, I thought, okay, there's a few small worms. Okay, let's not get excited here. So I started to think, why would parasites cause multiple sclerosis? Well, here it is. The long and the short of it is, we all have parasites. If I were to tell you your dog, your cat, your horse has parasites, you would say to me, oh, that's no big deal. I'm simply going to take my animal to the veterinarian. I'll get the proper medication. 2-3 weeks will go by. Everything will be fine. Well, when I started to really wake up, is the term that I like to use, because I classify myself as asleep prior to this life-altering diagnosis that I had. I realized that people can have parasites too. And I certainly wasn't taught this in school. And where do we get parasites? Well, we get them from all kinds of places, Pua. Like if you swim in a lake, you have parasites. If you swim in the ocean, you can have parasites. If you have a dog, if you have a cat, if you have animals, they just come from everywhere. So if we all have parasites, then why do only some people get multiple sclerosis? And why do only some people get certain diagnoses that are linked to parasites? Well, here's the answer to that. Our gut lining protects us from these parasites, which we ingest or end up in our digestive tract. When we have holes in our gut lining, and how do we get holes in our gut lining? That's from poor diet, which I certainly had. That is from stress, which I certainly had. And as Gabor Mate suggests, the famous physician from Vancouver, well, he's originally from Budapest, I believe, but he's in Vancouver, Canada, and he specializes in childhood trauma. And he did some research on people with MS, women specifically, and found them to have, all of them, to have childhood trauma. And I thought, oh, for goodness sakes, I don't have childhood trauma. I had a beautiful childhood. Well, actually, when I started to journal, I realized I had actually suppressed this, believe it or not, Pua, but I was raped by a family member at the age of 15. Nothing was done about it in my family, and I suppressed it. I told myself I was fine. Very, very quickly, everything started to line up. Stress, poor diet, eating foods that are going to eat holes in my gut lining, childhood trauma that I had buried. What happens when you have that perfect storm is what I like to refer to it as, the perfect storm. You create holes in your gut lining. So the parasites that are now contained to your GI tract and are supposed to flush themselves out naturally can now wiggle their way into the bloodstream, into the spinal column, into the brain. And there's a physician in the United States, Dr. McDonald, and he is a pathologist, and he did reports on MS patients and found 100% of the patients that he looked at, the cadavers, the dead bodies of MS patients who had died, had nematodes in their brain. And I thought, okay, all right, I'm going to start looking at this carefully. Now, why does diet help? Why does diet quiet your symptoms or pause your symptoms when you eat really well and you eat whole natural foods? Because parasites thrive on sugar and they thrive on cortisol, which is stress. They eat it. Oh my gracious, Pua, this is such a deep topic. Guess what else they eat? They eat heavy metals. We all have heavy metals in our body. Me specifically, I had a large amalgam filling in my mouth since I was 10 years old. In fact, you can see it in my big mouth laughing on the cover of my book. If you look carefully, you can see it. Thankfully, I've recently had that removed because no, you're not going to remove your amalgam fillings and then reverse MS. It's one of the pieces of the puzzle, but at least we're not feeding into these silent infections. So my goodness, Pua, it's really quite a tangled ball of yarn. It really is.
Absolutely. And you did what most people likely, from what it sounds like, just wouldn't have had the energy to do, is dig deep into all of these resources. And you've shared with me before, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around just the sheer amount of information that you had to dig through. One, to process this for yourself and have your own protocols, but to then take that and translate it into resources that you put together to support other people who might be going through this, and to give them a very clear and guided protocol without them having to spend what little energy they have, potentially also with one arm, to go through all of this just to find the same information that you found.
Absolutely. And I think what's really important to mention is I wouldn't be where I am without my husband, who was an incredible, incredible support to me. I was not the breadwinner at the time. And by the grace of God, that was the case, because many of my clients, they are the breadwinners of the family, and it's just absolutely catastrophic for them. And in answering your question, Pua, it's my absolute pleasure to put this information together for others, because it was an astronomical amount of work and it was incredibly painful. I used myself as the guinea pig, trial and error, trial and error. And yes, there are people in this world who have done the same thing, many, many others actually, but I didn't have communication with them. I had their books, which are dated. And one of the women that was influential in my healing is Anne Barak. And she unfortunately passed away about 10 years ago to suicide. And which is interesting, because she was quite a dedicated motivational speaker about MS, and she reversed MS and was helping others to do the same. There's actually some rumor that her death was not an accident. I couldn't reach out to these people. One, Anne Brock had passed. Terry Walls is another MS warrior, and she talks about diet, and she does touch on the importance of removing parasites from the body in her book. These were the people that really paved the way for me and gave me hope. But in answering your question or responding to your statement there, it was a tremendous amount of work. And I am so incredibly honored to be able to share my journey with other people if I could just save them the time and the energy, because with multiple sclerosis, you don't have any time and you don't have any energy.
Absolutely. This brings up an interesting question, and feel free to go into it if you'd like and to skip by it if you would like to.
You're making me nervous.
So to hear you're I know you may not be the first person to do this, but in a world where there is a very heavy emphasis on like the medical community believes that MS is irreversible, and when you have that diagnosis, you have a very prescribed trajectory of the rest of your life that you have created a new reality around. Do you ever fear for the backlash that you might get, or if, you did mention like that woman's death may not have been an accident? Like, is that a source of fear for you?
I've been asked this question many, many times, and my answer is always the same. No, I don't have any fear. I believe that I was born to do this. I believe that the Lord walks beside me while I do this. That was another huge component of my healing journey, was returning back to my faith. And I do believe strongly that the reason why I was granted access or provided access to this information, because it did seem to fall into my lap. Yes, I had to mull through it, but it was in front of me if I put the effort in. And I do feel that that came to me divinely. And I feel that when the Lord blesses you with a second chance, so to speak, and an opportunity to pass that blessing on to others, that we have a responsibility, and I have a responsibility. So to answer your question, no, I was born to do this. This is my...
Beautiful. Well, I'm so grateful that you said yes to this. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about the resources that you've put together. You have a book, you now have a course. What can people glean from those resources? What do you recommend they do first? If somebody is listening and either maybe they have been diagnosed with MS, they know somebody that has, or they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm just interested in doing a parasite cleanse because I want to stay as healthy as possible, or I want to change my diet. What might that look like for someone who's interested in learning more?
What an excellent question. With where to start, most definitely I would direct people to the resources that I put together, and I collaborated them in my book, which are available on Amazon. As you mentioned earlier, my book is called Live Like You're Not Scared. The reason why I'm very proud of my book, as I'm sure every author says about their book, but I'm very proud of my book. And the reason is there's not one answer to multiple sclerosis. And I was incredibly overwhelmed in the beginning. I knew that there was a diet component. I knew there was a childhood trauma or trauma stress component. Doesn't necessarily have to be from childhood, but just trauma and stress in your life. Every one of my clients' MS was triggered by a stressful event. Their paralysis was triggered by a stressful event. There is an emotional component. There's a spiritual component. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I have all of this information surrounding me. In fact, I talk about it in my book. I had it around me on the floor because I couldn't stand. So I had it on the floor, and it was around me in a semicircle, like a half moon. And I remember thinking, where do I start? So as a former ICU nurse, I like protocols. I like steps. I am a big fan of the old checklist. Give me a checklist. Where do I start and what do I do? And that's exactly what I put together in the book. I'm very interested, of course, in people's opinions and scientific research and the medical journals. But where do I start? You tell me what to do, Pua, to heal MS, and I'll do it. So I thought, okay, that's actually a fun little story. I have a very dear friend of mine who lives on a beautiful acreage, and I would drive to her house when I could drive again. And this was about a year after my healing journey. Prior to me writing the book. And we were walking along her acreage, and we always put our Uggs on and our toques and our big aviator glasses, and we saved the world in 15 minutes walking around her acreage. And she said to me, or we were just chatting about life, shooting the breeze. And I said, and she's a former emergency nurse. She worked on one of the largest emergency units in Western Canada. She's a pretty neat girl. And I said, Meg, like, I just wish I could share this with people. I wish I could break this down and help people, because there's just no way that, well, for me personally, I like to research. It's something that I really enjoy doing. This was very challenging. And then of course I was very sick, and on and on. And she looked at me, and in typical Megan fashion, she said, just do it. I said, what? She said, just do it. Just put it together. And that was the day. So I put the book together. So that's where I would start. That's definitely where I would start. The step-by-step is, we'll take the guessing out of it, and we'll set, I actually playfully called it the yellow brick road to healing in some of the chapters, because I just wanted that step-by-step. And I think that's a fantastic place for people to start. And it is a significant amount of work, Pua, but my goal, and it's certainly working for my current clients, is that if any task at all, no matter how big, is broken down into a step-by-step guide, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Someone just sent me this quote the other day. It said, if you're having trouble starting something, it just means the first step isn't small enough.
Amen. There you go. So true. Let's take that first step.
Absolutely.
My father, go ahead, Pua, pardon me.
You go.
When I was a little girl, my father just has this really neat way of explaining things and saying things. And when I was young, I would get overwhelmed with the smallest of tasks. And then when I went on to high school, bigger tasks, and university, bigger still. And he would call me, and he would always say, he calls me little girl when he wants me to pay attention. He would say, little girl, how do you eat an elephant? And then my response was always, one bite at a time. And that's it right there. One bite at a time, one step at a time. Exactly what you said, Pua. Just take that first step. And I put a roadmap together so that other people can take hold of this and get their lives back.
Incredible. And it's such a blessing for anybody to know you and to have you in their sphere, whether that's simply reading your book or working with you directly, because you have this energy. Like, you're a fighter. You are feisty.
I'm a fighter. I'll agree with you there.
I met you, I was like, I have never met somebody so passionate and so feisty, and someone that just has, like, your eye is on the prize and you are not going to stop until you get there. And I love that so much about you, and to have that energy in a sphere of support where anything outside might feel very dismal and very hopeless. And you also have this incredible sense of humor. You can laugh about this very dark subject.
You are really pumping up my tires over there.
I mean,
you're pumping me right up.
It's true. Like, I'm so thankful to know you and that you are doing this work. And
I greatly appreciate that. How kind.
Yeah.
How incredibly kind. You know what? I just think we are divine beings, Pua. We are created by God, and we can do all things. And I think one of the victories of the enemy is to convince us otherwise. And we can do all things. And especially what's really neat is we all were born uniquely. We all have different skill sets. And isn't it fun that if we lack in a certain area, that we can lean on someone who's strong in that particular area? And that's really quite beautiful. So if you don't want to spend 6 years researching multiple sclerosis, you don't have to. You don't have to, because you can lean on me, because that is what I have done. And for you, you've just been so incredible for me, Pua. My incredible website together, I cannot thank you enough. It looks fantastic, and people can reach me now. They can find me. I really appreciate that. I worked very hard on my book and my step-by-step course, because what I was finding was, okay, Pua, can I just brag a little bit? I'm just going to tell you something a little bit. I'm going to sound really juvenile. My book went number 1 on Amazon for MS in the first week. And I thought, oh my gosh, this girl from a small town, here we go. We're doing it. And I thought, you know what? People are craving the truth. That's what it is. It's the truth. That's what they're looking for. And I thought, okay, well, I didn't go into great detail about silent infections in my book because you have to be ready to receive this information. And there's some very graphic photos of what I had passed and what my clients are passing. And I wanted to save that for if the person was interested in taking a step further. I wanted to save that for the course because maybe the taking matters into your own hands isn't something for you because this, and I do appreciate you saying, Pua, that I'm a fighter, because that is indeed the truth. You must be a fighter. You must be a fighter. There's no magic pill. The medications that are available for multiple sclerosis do nothing more than suppress the immune system. Any decorated neurologist will tell you the exact same thing. These medications simply suppress the immune system and therefore suppress the symptoms temporarily. A lot of the pharmaceutical information on these medications state very clearly that if you take them, that you're at high risk for another autoimmune disease on top of what you have. This is not a secret. This is well documented. And actually, I encourage anyone who is on immunosuppressant drugs to print off the monograph online. All you have to do is open up your Google search bar, type in the name of your medication, followed by the word monograph, and just read for yourself. It's generally a 30 to 40 page document, and you can see the risks. Now, one of the things that I want to make very clear, Pua, is I am not anti-pharma. I have administered life-saving medications in the trauma bays and in the emergency room and on the trauma unit and in ICU. Research shows that if you put some cayenne pepper under your tongue, it will dilate your blood vessels, your veins. If I'm having a heart attack, Pua, please do not put cayenne pepper under my tongue. I want pressors. I want the heavy hitter drugs. These are tried, tested, and true drugs. I am not anti-pharma, but I do think that it's very important that you take a hard look at your diet, your lifestyle, the overall picture, because the research is very clear that MS doesn't fall from the sky. It's not something that just happens to you. At the risk of sounding aggressive, it's actually something that we bring on ourselves. And the good news about that is that we can reverse it. We are in the driver's seat if you're willing to do the work. And I do not condemn anyone who's not interested in doing the work, because not everyone has a fighting spirit, truth be told.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think that is something that might get lost in the sauce of all of this. Is there are many places where pharmaceuticals, to your point, have literally saved lives.
That's right, of course.
I've heard there are podcasters that I listen to. I mean, Joe Rogan just talked about this in a recent podcast, and I think a lot of people look at him as being fairly anti-pharma, and he was like, no, I'm not. I don't want to take things that aren't proven to help me, but there are plenty of things that are perfectly good and have saved many lives. So I think that's a really, really important distinction. I would love to hear what is life like for you today? What are you interested in? What are you focusing on? How are you living your life? What is it like?
Well, I appreciate you mentioning Joe Rogan, because I actually quoted him in my book. I was watching a podcast that he did, and Joe Rogan referred to our bodies as our meat vehicles. And I thought that was hilarious, because he's absolutely right. Our soul lives in our body. Without our meat vehicle, as Joe Rogan says, without our bodies, we're unable to do very basic things, and our soul wants to explore. That's the whole purpose of coming down here to earth, is to explore and grow and learn. And if you're stuck in a bed sick overnight, I was unable to drive my car, couldn't push my daughter on the swing, I could barely make a sandwich. It was absolutely, it was horrible. And as Joe Rogan said, you have to take care of your meat vehicle. So to answer your question,
test one day, I think that would be
to answer your question, what am I doing? I take care of my meat vehicle. So my meat vehicle and I can do lots of things. I horseback ride. That's something that I really enjoy. I go biking with my children. Gracious, surely to goodness, I do more things than that. One of the things that I really enjoy doing still, because it's very much my passion, I've decided that I am a bookworm at heart, is I just like to read. I like to read in the garden, sit out with my sun hat, my big sunglasses, and read. And that's one of the things that was absolutely impossible with MS was being able to focus for long periods of time. And that may not sound very thrilling to most, but I really enjoy that. And it's something that was very, very serious and challenging. I do enjoy chatting with people. It's one of the reasons why I became a nurse in the first place, was to help others and assist others. I believe that I'm supposed to help heal people in this lifetime of mine. And with MS too, Pua, it's one of the symptoms of MS is you cannot make eye contact with people. So it's incredibly strange. And I wouldn't have believed that if I hadn't have gone through it myself. But it's actually a very common symptom of MS. When you walk into a store, you have to divert your eyes. You can't look at people. It's very difficult to explain. And to be quite honest, I don't understand why. So one of the things, it actually makes me emotional when I think about it, because not being able to look into someone's eyes and connect, because when you're looking to someone's eyes, you're connecting with them spiritually, I believe. And looking down, when I do enjoy communicating the way I do, was very painful. So I just like talking to people and looking in their eyes.
That is strange.
It is strange. It is strange. Actually, I should ask my neurologist what his thoughts are on that. Why
Yeah.
why that is. That was extremely isolating. Yeah.
It's
It
like
was
you're trapped in
extremely
your own
isolating.
body and you're trying to connect and you just can't. Like, I just can't imagine.
That's exactly what it
Oh,
is. You're trapped.
what
Yeah.
a horrible, horrible
Not anymore though, Pua.
gosh,
That's
not
behind
anymore.
me.
Incredible. Well, Leslie, you and I have talked for hours and will continue to talk for hours.
Oh, I hope so.
I just thank you again. I can't stop complimenting you because you're just a phenomenal human. And I love that you're in my orbit and that we're friends now. And I love your voice messages that you send me. So please never stop doing that.
I
And
won't.
thank you.
Well, I greatly appreciate your time, and just as you are complimenting me in terms of my spirit, and I greatly appreciate yours in return, and being open to this, Pua. This is new for a lot of people to hear. And it's difficult to change our paradigm, isn't it? It's very difficult to change our mindset. And at the risk of taking a trip to Negative Town, I've actually lost some friends over this, some former colleagues. They're not interested in hearing this. I've gained many others, thanks be to God, but I have some people are just not interested in hearing it. And I do find it's rather unfortunate, because it's when we keep an open mind, that's when we learn. And I very much appreciate that about you. You, for whatever reason, you seem to listen when I talk, and I really appreciate that. You just make me feel so welcomed, and it's always a safe space talking to you. I appreciate that, because that's how we learn from each other, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I just appreciate people who, you tell the truth and you may or may not believe what the rest of the world wants to believe and what we've been told. And I love when somebody is just curious. This is what someone told me. I'm curious if there's another reality out there.
That's right.
It's so admirable, and it can be isolating. It can be scary. It takes a certain amount of courage to come out and say something that goes against the grain of what 99% of the population believes. So I honor your bravery in that perspective. And if
Thank
anybody
you.
wants, yes, of course.
Coming back to the meat vehicle Joe Rogan comment, when we don't take care of our meat vehicles, it breaks down, plain and simple. And it's our responsibility to put it back together. So like you said, Pua, some people are just curious. Some people are actually interested and will take action. And that's fine, because we're all on our own journey. And that's what's so great. That's what's so great about this earth walk, is that we are all in control of our own journey. And some people may read my book or listen to this and say to themselves, no, thank you. No, not interested. I'm really pleased with the path that I'm on. And that's great. And then there's other people, well, I wouldn't say great. That's probably too strong of a verb. But I just think that is your path. And that is fantastic that we're able to make that decision, is what I'm trying to say. And then other people, you find your people, don't you? That's a whole nother podcast. That's for a whole nother time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do that one for sure.
Like attracts like, doesn't it?
Like attracts like.
Well,
I
I'm
feel
so
like
thankful I attracted you.
likewise, we have to thank Alex, who my podcast editor actually introduced us to each other. We
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. I think about if I were to be diagnosed with MS and what that world and that reality might look like. And knowing myself, I might be the curious, but not the action taker kind of person where I might let the fatigue take over. I might let, like I think so much about having something like what you've created as this just breath of hope and like, oh my God, somebody put something together to make it a little bit easier because I don't know if I'd have the courage and the strength to do it myself. And so I think there are many people out there who hear this and say, yes, this is something that I believe could be true and I'm interested in learning more. I don't have it in me to do it myself. So if somebody's listening like that, how can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about what you have to offer?
Yes, of course. That's the whole goal, isn't it, Pua? Just to offer someone hope. How they can reach me, my website, lesliewingrowich.com. My book is available on Amazon, but I do have a link on the website. That would be a great place to start. I do have contact information available on there. And I am proud to announce that my course is available and up and running. It is just so amazing to have the step-by-step there in the course. Just click and learn, baby. Click and learn. It's so great. So yeah, website Pua. Oh, and
Beautiful.
of course my Insta handles. I'm very new to this. Oh my gracious. Sometimes I just feel like a dinosaur. I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. Do you know that, Pua?
Yes, you're coming here. We're going to the Jurassic Park.
Okay, yeah. So that's where we're going. Yeah. Anyway, so why did I just talk about Jurassic Park? That was random. What just happened there
Um,
with the park?
you said
One bite
you
at a
said
time? What's going on?
you're
Reel me
I don't
back in, lady.
but you referred to yourself as being ancient.
Thank you for that reminder. Yes. Hey, it's my birthday tomorrow. Speaking of ancient, speaking
Happy
of ancient,
birthday. You're getting younger.
and then your birthday next week.
It
We're
is.
we're birthday twins. We're birthday
I'm not
month twins.
small.
Yeah. So my Insta handle. So L Wingrowich and then Leslie Wingrowich on Facebook. And I'm new to content. People have to be very patient with me, but it's coming. I'm also excited, Pua. This new microphone that I just got, I'm recording my audiobook. And here's why that's really important. When you have multiple sclerosis, it is so difficult to read, Pua. Oh my gosh, it's challenging. And I know that to be true. So everyone can just be patient with me, but it should be up in about 3 weeks, the audiobook. Yeah.
So fast. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Should be up and running. I'm almost done recording.
And by the time this goes live, it might be much sooner than that.
Oh,
Maybe.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll get to work.
You're phenomenal. I will link to all of those resources in the show notes. And thank you again for spending this time with me, for turning your story into something that's going to save so many lives, and for your courage and your tenacity and your grit and your just oomph. And I'm just impressed by you and thankful that we are now lifelong friends.
I greatly appreciate your time and your listening ear. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It has been a pleasure.